team, it's time for the Daily Detangler. Why tell stories? We've been talking a lot about storytelling, and I thought I would put together this Detangler today to help me clarify why stories are important. Sometimes I wonder if it's just an exercise or what the value is. And if you heard ever heard the saying, "Oh, you're just telling stories," as if those aren't true. But really, storytelling is a critical component of the human experience. So let's talk about business storytelling. The greatest children's book of all times to many people is Where the Wild Things Are. This is a adventurous story. It's been read by millions of kids and parents. And the book is really about this idea of letting out your inner monsters, your emotions, and being creative and showing imagination and allowing the imagination to help you escape life's boring doldrums. It's also a testament to family and to acceptance. It's also very real. There's a lot of emotion in it. And actually, in the United States, the book was banned by some school districts because of consequences that the monster had, where he didn't get dinner because he was so emotional. So, on one hand, it's the greatest story of all time, and yet it was banned. That's a lot of emotion around a children's book. And why is that? Well, stories are relatable. They're relatable to kids, they're relatable to parents, and they're relatable to different situations. All stories have a plot, and characters drive that plot. And this is something that, as a salesperson myself, and trying to relate to others, sometimes I forget that listening requires energy, and cutting through the noise today is very difficult, and there's so much going on, and there's so much to do, and there's never enough time. And the idea of capturing somebody's attention and bringing them along is something that I need to spend more time on, and I need to be more disciplined about. And when I think about the stories that I tell, how am I putting them together? How am I structuring them to be relatable? And the thing that come back to is, all stories have some sort of plot, some sort of journey that the listener goes on or the reader goes on. And then there's characters. There's characters that drive the plot, and they're inseparable. Like Lord of the Rings. You can't really have Lord of the Rings without the characters. The plot doesn't make any sense. The children's book of The Hungry Caterpillar. Without the caterpillar, there is no children's book. So there's always the plot that unfolds and the characters within it. And, as in business, what that means is we need to be able to influence and frame out both, not just the characters and their role in the story, but the story itself, the plot. And that's difficult today. So why is that? Well, in today's business world, our world's complex, and the customer's world is complex. And navigating this can really be difficult. And there are a lot of approaches out there to help salespeople overcome this point of sale challenge. And the question is what's the best way to do that? There's always more skill to learn. There's always another technique. There's always another methodology, whether it's challenger sale or command of the message, or just any methodology that we can possibly equip salespeople with. And what's the best way to do that? Take a look at take a look at this picture. If you look at these two worlds, what if each of these has its own gravitational pull? What if there's a gravitational force that's pulling towards your world as the vendor? And what if there's a gravitational force on the customer side? Those two gravitational forces are often at odds, and salespeople are stuck in the middle. And this orbit, this gravitational pull of our product and the product we're selling doesn't necessarily translate into the customer's world. And salespeople need to be able to navigate that. And what we found is that there's elements of a great story, and there's elements to help cut through this complexity and overcome productitis. And there are ingredients that salespeople can be equipped with, not so that they're scripted, but so that they can navigate and tailor. And we call that the story builder. The business storytelling is the best way to give sellers the ingredients that they need. And these ingredients, like the world that buyers are in, the setting and the challenges within the setting, the plot that unfolds, the idea of the villain and the hero. Who's the hero of the story that salespeople are telling? Is it your company is the hero, or is your company the guide? Is the customer the hero? How does that work? What's the role of the guide in that? And what does it mean to make somebody successful? These are elements of story that are in every movie, every story that's been told, especially where there's a journey. If you think about Star Wars or the Matrix trilogies, or just any of your favorite movies, Mission Impossible, all of those movies have these elements. Why is storytelling on one hand complicated and on the other hand so powerful? That's the key question. And why do salespeople like to tell stories? Why do they relate to their customers with story? When you think about the message that needs to be delivered in that point of sale or in this conversation, this simple handshake or this simple interaction is very complex and complicated. And from a message perspective, a lot of companies give salespeople the features, the benefits, the historical perspective, specifications of the product, and these components are all wrapped up into, well, why should buyers buy now? Why should buyers? Why should they care? And why should they even listen to us? Let's tell them why these things are important and what they should do, why they should engage, and why they should come at and listen, and why they should buy. And we should just tell them, and we should communicate, and we should just explain. And that doesn't work today because salespeople show up and they aren't as valuable and as relevant. And when it comes to commanding the message, which I'm borrowing from the website, Command the Message website, these are great outcomes. So these outcomes of executing discovery and structuring a sales conversation and repeatedly gaining access and aligning differentiation and identifying gaps, these are great and they look good on paper. The challenge is salespeople have to navigate the buyer's world, not just to communicate why they should care or why they should buy or why they should listen, but to get into the reality of the buyer's world and the buyer's situation. For example, buyers, plural, who are buyers? What do they need to discover? What if there are more than one conversation? I mean, salespeople today might be in 50 conversations. Who specifically are they talking to? What are they saying? What's important to the champion, the change agent? How does the change agent need to navigate the various stakeholders? What are they saying and how are they enrolling tons of different perspectives? I mean, maybe 10, 20, 30 different perspectives. How do they get people to agree? How do they figure out how to enroll a group of people who don't work for them? They can't just mandate and send emails to enroll people. How do they do that? How do they change their own company as change agents? What messages do they deliver? Do they just deliver a message that says, here's what we should do, and here's why you should care, and here's why you should listen to me. A lot of times that behavior of here's why I'm the best, and here's why we need to do this, and here's what I know, and you guys should do everything I say, will alienate buyers in that position. It actually puts people off internally. So what are we equipping salespeople to do? And when you look at this view, this complexity that is your company and also their world, and navigating that, what's the best way to cut through that? And how do we provide the right ingredients for salespeople who are stuck in the middle? And there's a lot of complexity there. So do we just give them more? Well, in a lot of companies, we do. We say, well, let's all work together. Let's sales and enablement and customer success and product and marketing and strategy. Let's all give the salespeople what they need. Salespeople need deliverables. They need the outputs. Let's just give it to them. Let's produce everything we need in our siloed view and give them more of these jars. And then, we know in driving out enterprise, they need to get access to the right buyers, and they need to fill the pipeline, and they need to launch and be able to represent our products. And we need to do better account planning. So let's do that. So in that view, how does this all come together? How does this fragmented mason jar view come together? And if you think about it, that coming together of those multiple perspectives to get access or elevate the message or be relevant in a product launch or do the account planning or fill the pipeline, these things all require a variety of different ingredients from all these groups. What's the best way to synthesize all those? What's the best way to bring all those perspectives together and then equip salespeople to communicate that? Is it giving them a script, or is it something else? That something else like telling stories and telling the stories that relate. And from a sales perspective, when it comes to account planning, trying to assemble all that, if they just do it themselves and they just double down on sales process and sales methodology and filling out the checklists of activity, they will stop factoring in the other groups. That's kind of by design, because activity will overcome and outmaneuver and trump the synthesized view. So who's synthesizing on behalf of sales? Because sales is driving activity. Well, Plato says those who tell the stories rule society. That's a pretty powerful statement. Those who tell the stories rule society. What if it was those who tell the stories rule the sale? What would that look like? And why is that important? Storytelling is part of human nature. I mean, just to get to the basic essence of it, we've been spending a lot of time on human nature. We experience and we engage in the world around us. And those experiences that we share are often told in stories. When somebody asked, what was your greatest interaction with a salesperson, we'll tell a story. If somebody asks, what was your worst experience with a salesperson, we'll tell a story. If we say, what was your greatest victory in your business role, we'll hear a story. If we say, look, what was your most miserable failure, we'll hear a story. Stories help provide emotive and relatable, context and also clarity to the situation at hand. And stories are relatable. Stories help us learn complex ideas. As children, we learn the concept of sharing, and if you know anything about human development, we're incredibly selfish because we can't take care of ourselves. As human infants, we're born with an inability to take care of ourselves. So in preschool, we're very selfish. It's mine, 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 mine. Well, how do we teach the complex behavior of, hey, you should share? Well, we tell stories. What about in the workplace of we should all work together and we should all come together and figure out the best possible solution? outside of our silo. Well, stories can help with that. Or we should have empathy for buyers, not in terms of here's a persona, but in terms of what's happening inside the client's world. What stories are we listening to about our customers? What stories are we telling about our customers? And stories help us explain complex or complicated events like client meetings. How do salespeople talk about client meetings? Are we creating enough space for them to tell those stories? What about when a new stakeholders engaged or shows up into a meeting? How do we explain that? Well, it's usually in the form of a story, or changes in the market, or changes in the business landscape or in the company. How is that related? It's usually in the form of a story. And unfortunately, in today's business landscape and in the way that things are moving so quickly, there's just not a lot of room for storytelling. But stories can synthesize a lot. You know, providing salespeople conversation guides to help them tell the story is a synthesis activity. It doesn't turn into a bunch of sentences to say. It provides ingredients. Stories can synthesize across marketing and product and brand and strategy groups. Also, stories help us adapt our message to be relatable to the other person listening. When we encode our messages up for others, stories help us relate in a tailored way that makes the most sense. When we're trying to plant seeds, the idea of planting a seed in order for it to grow over time into a possibility, into an opportunity, stories help us do that. And stories help us discover things that we didn't even know existed. The idea of what a possibility is and what's possible based on what others are doing, or what's possible in the client organization based on their past experience. Stories can help cut through that. Stories also help enroll and catalyze, right? Like trying to figure out this idea of going to customer. I don't know about you, but just trying to figure that out and trying to relate to that and trying to share what we're doing and trying to explain it even. Stories help. What kind of stories am I telling, and how am I sharing those ideas, and how am I providing clarity? When we think about it, the idea of a platform, how do I communicate the value of a platform? How do I communicate the value of being a change agency? Is it just about the things we do, or is it the impact we have? It's almost impossible to talk about the impact we have without telling a story. And the idea that we can test that story and try the story and role play out the words and the ingredients of that story. How do I lean into that more? And stories are unifying. One of the stories that stands out is where we've used the story builder in the past, and the chief commercial officer said, look, I think one of the things that really resonated with me the most was, at the end of the day, I thought it was very powerful to see that everybody got out of their own role and put the company hat on. And that's getting out of their own role and putting the company hat on. Why is that? And how does that happen? Because everybody's focused on figuring out the story to tell. And the story to tell, in that situation was about the ingredients, the plot, the pitfalls, the themes, the cast, the formula. What's the formula for client success, and how is that communicated? And these stories that we figure out, and how I try to relate to those is, it can be really fun. It can be fun to figure out. And that's one of the cool things about creating a story from scratch is we have a lot of capabilities, and we have a lot of experiences, and we have a lot of past impact, and we have a lot of great and awesome things we're doing. So how am I helping tell that story? So this has been today's Daily Detangler. I wanted to just think about and embrace today the power of story, and ground to the fact that, I've seen a lot of sales training, been in a lot of sales training, done a lot of sales training, and the most unifying and powerful approach that I've seen to bring 20, 30, 40 people together has been through the power of story and business storytelling. So I thought I'd share my experiences with that and look forward to your feedback.